There are 14 NFL teams fighting for the Super Bowl. Welcome, football fans, to your 2025 NFL playoff team rankings. In this video, I rank all 14 NFL playoff teams. The 7 in the AFC, the 7 in the NFC. And no, this is not based on seed. This is not based on their matchup in the first round and who I think's going to win. No, this is me simply saying who is the best, who is the worst, and how do I order every NFL playoff team in terms of what I believe their chance is to win Super Bowl 59. It's just that simple. And within this discussion, we're talking about which teams are the contenders, which teams actually have a chance to raise the Lombardi Trophy, which teams are dark horses, which teams maybe, if things go their way, can make a deep run in the playoffs. And lastly, but most importantly, which teams are absolute utter frauds. That also has to be discussed in this video. The 14 playoff teams. Let me know in the comment section below where you rank every playoff team. Gronk, spike the like button, and let's go. Let's start it off with the team that I think is the weakest, the worst entering the NFL playoffs. That is the Houston Texans at number 14. The Texans entering the playoffs are playing lousy football. They lack execution offensively, consistency in the passing game. Their short passing game pretty much doesn't exist, and their passing game pretty much is Nico Collins. Their run game has been spotty at best lately. Joe Mixon has kind of fallen off the map because of the lack of run blocking in front of him. Wow, it's incredible how much an offensive line can impact the consistency of an offense, especially considering when Bobby Slowick can't adjust whatsoever. The defense of the Texans is good, and it's their lone chance of making a little bit of a run. I would just say simply winning the first round. I can't imagine a world where this team wins multiple playoff games. They're just disjointed. They take too many penalties. Their defense has been regressing, although getting healthier at linebacker. Their secondary, specifically safety, is kind of decimated right now. The Texans are going to need a miracle. They're going to need to turn this entire thing around. Luckily, they play the Chargers at home, a team that's playing better than them, that's executing better than them, that might be better coached than them, that might have the better quarterback than them. All those things can be true, but they're also not one of the more overwhelming talented teams. The Texans can go toe-to-toe with the talent of the Chargers. So if the Texans can figure it out, perhaps they can win. But I just feel like this team just has no rhythm, no reason, no rhyme. So I have them at number 14, man. At number 13, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, unlike the Texans, the Steelers have voodoo on their side, and there's always the respect for Mike Tomlin and a defense led by TJ Watt. And on paper, this is an extremely talented defense. This is a team that showed throughout the season, in my opinion, unlike the Texans, that they can beat the teams that they're better than, that they can compete with a number of the teams that are considered better than them. And the Steelers, luckily enough, actually matched up with the team that probably they wanted to play. Like in the first round out of all the teams, maybe besides the Texans, with how the Steelers are playing right now, with how they are playing specifically offensively, they needed to play a team they were familiar with. That's the Baltimore Ravens. They needed to play a team that they can believe they can beat. And although Baltimore did absolutely shellac them in the last meeting, I think there's enough based on that first victory over Baltimore, based on the history between the two teams, based on their success against Lamar Jackson, based on Mike Tomlin getting this team as an underdog to be fired up in this spot, for them to believe that they can actually go to Baltimore and win or put up a fight. Like, I could see Pittsburgh thinking they can win this game. And that is a big deal, honestly, in the playoffs, because sometimes teams just give up. They don't think they have any chance. I think the Steelers think they have a chance. And I think they do because they'll be healthier than that last matchup, right? They'll have Larry Ogunjobi, Dante Jackson, I believe. They'll have Joey Porter the entire game, hopefully. They'll have George Pickens. Now, they still got to figure out the entire offense, which has been a problem lately. There has been no rhythm in the passing game. The run game has been really weak. Najee Harris and, Jaylen Warren have been kind of just meh. Like, they need to figure out if Calvin Austin can step up, Van Jefferson can step up, Pat Freiermuth. Somebody in the receiving department is going to have to step up. Russell Wilson can't be forcing the ball in the red zone, can't be taking horrible sacks. He's got to manage the game effectively. But the best chance for this team is to play through their defense, to get some turnovers. They need to make sure they can stop the run. If they can't stop the run in these playoffs, they're going to have absolutely no chance. But if they can stop the run, specifically against Derrick Henry in that first game, they can put themselves in position to rush the quarterback. They can specifically put themselves in position to play aggressive coverage against a Baltimore receiving corps without Zay Flowers. So beyond that round, sure, they're going to have to figure out how to play better against maybe the Chiefs or something like that. But I'm just talking about the overall team, and I feel like Russell Wilson has playoff experience. Mike Tomlin has playoff experience. Many of these players are experienced on the defensive side. They have enough in terms of the coaching. They have enough in terms of the pedigree to at least pull off one upset, I think. So that's why I have them above the Texans. I think they're overall a more competent, consistent football team, despite both teams having major flaws. At number 12, I've got the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are a lot more fun than the previous two teams we've discussed, but they also are extremely flawed. Their defense is probably the worst that remains in the playoffs. Like, their defense, specifically against the run, has suffered. Their pass coverage, we'll see how Marshawn Lattimore is able to improve that if he can stay on the field. But their pass rush is mediocre. Their overall defense just does not really get you excited as a possible underdog team. Usually these underdog teams need to combine some sort of great coaching or great quarterback play with a good defense, and I just don't think the Commanders really have that. But what they do have is a high-flying offense that's capable of getting in a shootout with a number of different teams and pretty much every team in the league, and maybe going toe-to-toe with the opposing offense. Daniels can be extremely clutch, in those big moments, as he's been all season. I think that really, Cliff Kingsbury has been one of the best OCs in football. Their run game has been very dynamic from that quarterback-running back standpoint of combination, and Terry McLaurin has had a career season, arguably. They've got enough, like Zacchaeus, Ertz. These other guys are contributing, but I really think it just comes down to, can Jaden Daniels play hero ball? Can he get hot? Can he go on a run? Can this offense continue to play the way they've played? And can this defense make timely stops? Can they get a little bit better against the run? Can Lattimore improve their secondary just slightly? Those are all factors. Those are all things that I think will determine their length of stay in the playoffs. But I like their offense more than the Texans, more than the Steelers by a ginormous amount. And despite me liking the Texans defense or the Steelers defense more, I think the Commanders are an overall better team because I think they're able to put up points against pretty much every team. So that's why I have them at number 12. At number 11, I've got the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are a really well-coached team, and that's why they belong at number 11. Sean Payton is one of the best coaches in football this year, if not the coach of the year. Vance Joseph is one of the best defensive coordinators, if not the best defensive coordinator this season. The defense led the NFL in sacks, led the NFL in pressures, pressure percentage. The defense has a stud corner in Surtain, a stud interior defensive lineman in Zach Allen, a stud edge rusher in Nick Bonito. The offense has a rookie quarterback that's humming in this scheme. Sean Payton has pulled the triggers. He's pulled the right levers for Bo Nix in terms of the screen game, the quick passing game, the RPOs. Their run game has 3 different running backs they attack you with. I think McLaughlin's the best of the bunch. He can provide a little bit of explosion, but we've seen a lot of different weapons click for this team. A lot of different weapons, right? We've seen the guys at wide receiver, in terms of Mims, in terms of also Sutton, in terms of Vele, in terms of all these different players that I think are contributing in their specific roles. So Sean Payton just seems to understand how to get the most out of each individual skill player on his offense. The offensive line, I think, is one of the best in the playoffs, which also gives them a good floor to their offense. So I like the Broncos. Like, I think they're a feisty underdog. I don't think they're great. I think their defense is maybe a little bit overrated in terms of the stats and things like that, because recently they didn't play well against Cleveland. They didn't play well against the Chargers. They didn't play well against the Bengals, but they did play amazing against the third-string Chiefs. So that maybe propped them up a little bit. But what I'm excited about is how well their offense is played. Like, Bo Nix has played really well. He's coming into the playoffs with a lot of confidence. They've got enough playmakers. They've got a great O-line. Like, I could see them moving the ball and sustaining drives against a number of defenses in these playoffs. And with that defense, yeah, sure, they might struggle against Lamar or Josh Allen. I mean, who doesn't? But against the majority of the playoff teams, I feel like they could go toe-to-toe, put some pressure on the quarterback. Like, the Broncos are a competent team, and they're very well schooled. And in the playoffs, one game plan can really spark a upset. So at number 11, I've got the Broncos. At number 10, the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are at number 10, and I have severely soured on this team. You know, I just don't see enough in terms of pass rush. I don't see enough in terms of receiving core. I don't see enough in terms of corner. I really don't think that this is necessarily all on Jordan Love. I don't necessarily think that this is all on Matt LaFleur, like, not at all. I really feel like at the end of the day, the Packers just do not compete on a talent level with teams like the Lions, teams like the Eagles, teams like the Bills, Ravens, or Chiefs. I think at the end of the day, they just are not in that category of talent. Like, the O-line is good. They put together a good scheme. The receivers are competent. Like, they're solid. I like every player involved. I love Josh Jacobs. I like Tucker Kraft. I think Romeo Doubs is solid. I think Reed is pretty electric, right? I think that McKinney is awesome. They have certain players that stand out. But to me, like, the D-line, the pass rush is below average. The receiving core without Watson lacks that explosion. Like, they just don't have enough to really be a true contender. Like, so to me, like, you would kind of label them more as a fraud. Like, going up against the Eagles in the first round, it's going to have to be an incredible Jordan Love game. He's going to have to carry. It's going to have to be an incredible Matt LaFleur game plan. Their defense is going to have to stop the run, which has been their strength. I think that this team is just maybe a year away, like, at the end of the day. Maybe just a year away. So that's why I have them at number 10, man. Jordan Love has been inconsistent. The defense has been inconsistent. They've lacked those big wins against good teams. Those are just things that continue to replay in my mind. That Vikings game did damage to me. Like, that hurt me. That Vikings game that they lost, they just never felt like they were as good as that team. And then the Vikings follow that up by getting wrecked by the Lions. Like, it just doesn't feel right. At number 9, the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are not overly talented either, but I think what I like about the Rams is I can trust McVay and Stafford in the playoffs, so they get the playoff experience boost. I think that at their best offensively, they've shown they can be absolutely potent, okay? Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams. This offense against Buffalo, this offense against Minnesota, they've had a few games this year where they have gone crazy, and they look like the Rams' offense of late last season. The defense also, I like the scheme. I like the confusion and coverage that they bring. I think the pass rush is really good, and I think that is probably the unit that inspires me more than Green Bay, that pass rush. Like, I think combining with Stafford and McVay and that combination with Puka Nacua in the playoffs, they can put up some points in a situation. Defensively, I feel like they can get to the quarterback. They don't have the best overall secondary. It's slow. It's not that good. There's not a lot of great players there. But the pass rush combined with the offensive heights, the offensive ceiling is what inspires me to a potential playoff run. Because a lot of the playoffs is about momentum, it's about getting a spark, and it's about riding that spark to success. So at number 9, I have the Rams. At number 8, I've got the Minnesota Vikings. I've moved them down, obviously. I thought they were absolutely atrocious against Detroit, and I thought specifically Sam Darnold. And honestly, I don't think this defense is that bad. I don't think this defense played bad against Detroit. I think this defense is good. I think this is one of the best defenses involved in the playoffs. But I do think they draw a tough matchup in the first round with McVay and Stafford, specifically for their style of defense. They're good against the run. I think they've got great weaponry on the outside. I think for the most part, their O-line's been good. I think for the most part, they do a good job turning the football over, creating sacks, creating negative plays defensively. But at the end of the day, that Sam Darnold performance against Detroit just absolutely did damage. Like I said with the Packers, like to my psyche, to my soul, to my understanding fundamentally of what I thought the Vikings were, Sam Darnold puked all over himself against the Detroit Lions, and I just can't overlook that, and I feel like it's going to happen again. It's going to take place. So, at number 8, I've got the Vikings. I think that they're overall as a team as competent on both sides of the ball as a majority of the teams above them. They just feel like they're missing a little bit in terms of maybe a little bit in the running game, definitely in terms of the quarterback, like X factor, and then defensively, maybe a little bit on the back end in terms of speed and versatility. But overall, that's a little bit nitpicky. I think most of this comes down to Sam Darnold and my truthful belief in that player. At number 7, I've got the Chargers, and a lot of it comes down to I love Herbert, and I like Harbaugh a lot, and I think the defense is really solid. That's really what it comes down to, and the offensive line. At a fundamental level, the Chargers are good on the O-line. They've got 2 great tackles. At a fundamental level, they're the number 1 scoring defense in the league, and although they might be a little bit inflated due to their opponents and who they've played, I think they're a good defense, and you can rely on them. They're going to make you earn it, okay? And they're a smart defense, most importantly. And then you've got Justin Herbert and a good O-line in front of him. And with Justin Herbert, you've got Ladd McConkey, at least one receiver that he can kind of rely on. J.K. Dobbins brings a little bit more balance to the offense. They're not an overwhelming team, but there's a clear set-out vision, a clear set-out identity of this team. I truly understand what they are at the end of the day, right? They're probably not going to win a lot of shootouts, but they have a quarterback that can make as many big throws, as many big plays, as many big moments as any in the league. And he can carry an offense with a good, competent defense that doesn't beat themselves. And that kind of combines to being a good playoff team, a potential dark horse, in my opinion, not a fraud, but not necessarily a contender. At number 6, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are at number 6, and this one was tough between them and the Chargers because I think the Chargers are probably the better team, overall, because I think the Chargers defense is a lot better than the Bucs. But the Bucs offense is sweet, wicked, sick, okay? Their offense is all around one of the toughest to defend. They're one of the top 3 screen teams, one of the top 3 run teams in terms of explosive run rate. They're one of the top 5 passing teams, right? And this even includes the time without Chris Godwin. They are absolutely potent. Mike Evans is a number 1 target that draws attention. McMillan is coming into his own. The O-line, I think, is really, really, diverse. In terms of they're great in their movement skills. They're good in their anchor and pass protection. Baker has been phenomenal. Liam Cohen has been just sick. Liam Cohen has been absolutely superb. And on the defensive side, what I like about the Bucs, despite them being inconsistent defensively, especially in pass coverage and pass defense, what I like about the Bucs is they stop the run and they are very volatile. So they complement a high potent offense with a defense that puts pressure, that's aggressive, that gets after you, and they stop the run. So I understand how those things will be meaningful in the playoffs with a good offense. So that's why I like the Bucs. I think they just have a little bit higher ceiling if their defense clicks just a little bit more than the Chargers do. At number 5, I actually have the Detroit Lions, the number 1 seed in the NFC. I like the Lions, don't get me wrong. I think this is going to seen as hate or something. But at the end of the day, I just feel like this defense is going to crack, and I just don't think that. I think the 4 teams ahead of them have a stronger chance of winning the Super Bowl. 3 of them would play them in the Super Bowl. Another team would play them in the NFC Championship. But I just feel like eventually, whether it be in the divisional round, the championship round, or the Super Bowl, the Lions defense is going to leak, it's going to crack, and it's going to be the reason they lose. I love their offense. It's one of, if not the best in football. In my opinion, it's the best all-around balanced offense in the league. It's the toughest to stop because they have all the answers, right? They have the answers from the slot. They have the answers from the running back. They have the answers in the running and pass game. They have the answers in play action. They have answers in the quick game. They have answers in, play action. They have answers in the deep game with Jamison Williams. They have all the layers of offense that makes it really, really hard to beat. They're physically dominant up front. They play with a great identity and mentality defensively. I appreciate their aggressiveness, but at the end of the day, I just think they'll be lacking a little bit in the talent department defensively for them to truly be that Super Bowl winner. I think they can get to the Super Bowl, for sure, but I don't necessarily know that even if they got there, that they would truly be the team that could hoist the Lombardi. So it's not even a Jared Goff thing. It's not even a Dan Campbell thing, although there's always the tendency for if he goes for a 4th down too many, it might backburn. But they've got a really good coaching staff. I mean, there's a reason Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn are being interviewed, like at the end of the day. So it really just comes down to the defense and my lack of trust in a big game that they'll really come through. I feel like they'll fall apart at the wrong moment, which maybe I'm just like playing around too much here. Maybe I'm just not believing in Detroit's defense. Like maybe you guys are higher on them and you'll have them higher on the list, and I totally get that. At number 4, the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens can win the Super Bowl this year. I think Detroit is a team that I think can get there, but I don't necessarily know if they can win. I think Baltimore can win. And it comes down to, can Lamar play in the playoffs like he did in the regular season and he does in the regular season? Because this has been a choker in the playoffs. Like, you can't get around it. Lamar has not been a good playoff quarterback. He needs to take it to the next level this year. That being said, I thought they drew a really tough first-round matchup because of the familiarity with the Steelers. I think they would have much rather played the Chargers. They much rather played the Texans, probably even the Broncos, right? Like, the Steelers are going to be the toughest game for them of the lower seeds because of the familiarity, right? But you got Derrick Henry for the playoffs. Lean on Derrick Henry, right? You've got 2 tight ends that I think is unique to attack defenses with. Hopefully Zay can return next week as long as you survive. I like the defense and how they're trending. I feel like they're not giving up many big plays anymore. I feel like their pass rush has been a bit better. I feel like their run defense has been consistently very good. I think that the Ravens, if their defense, they don't have to be dominant, but if their defense, bend but don't break style, give up 3s instead of 7s, their offense complements that with their continued dominance in the playoffs, this is a team that can win the Super Bowl. They get opportunistic interceptions, strip sacks, forced fumbles, turnovers from their defense. They can run it on you. They can create with Lamar Jackson. They can create big plays through the passing game. Like, that's where I see the cohesion coming. But it all comes down to Lamar. If Lamar is not himself, this team could be eliminated in the first round. Because I think the defense isn't quite good enough, despite my belief in how they've played lately, that they can win a defensive game in the playoffs. They need to win with a complement of all 3 phases. So at number 4, the Ravens. They have a little bit less room for error than I feel like the top 3 teams. At number 3, the Philadelphia Eagles. One of their biggest weaknesses has been starting the game fast. If they can start every game fast, this team might win the Super Bowl. Like, they can dominate you running the ball physically. They have enough weapons in the passing game, and it's a very vanilla scheme, but it's effective in the passing game, that they can create explosives if you overcompensate for Saquon. Defensively, they might be the best defense remaining. They've got a really good defensive coordinator. They've got a talented secondary. It's young, it's fast, it's good. Their pass rush is solid, not overwhelming, but solid. Jalen Carter's a star. Zach Bond's been a star this year, right? Josh Sweat's a very good player. They've got guys all over their defense. They've got gamers. This team can win with physicality. This team can win with skill. That's a true combination of Super Bowl prowess. I think this is the best team in the NFC. I think they're the most well-rounded team in the NFC. But that being said, their undoing could be Jalen Hurts. If he has to play from behind in a drop-back game, is their offense diverse enough? Do they have enough there? Can he handle that moment? Will he be confused? And then defensively, I think we have somewhat lacked, a Eagles. Like, they haven't played a lot of true contenders. They played the Ravens, right? But other than that, I feel like there's still a question about the Eagles in terms of like, okay, so how would it go against the Bills? How would it go against the Chiefs? How would it go against Detroit? I think there's questions about the Eagles in terms of like what hasn't happened for them. Not necessarily like what has happened, because I think you see the well-rounded nature of their team, their roster. It's more so like what the X factor of the unknown with the Eagles. That's a little bit weird. But they are 10-0 with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, and Saquon Barkley when they all play. So that's something to consider. At number 2, the Kansas City Chiefs. And a lot of people in the comments are going to say, Mitch, you got to put them at 1 because they're the back-to-back champs. And that's fair. You can do that. But that's not like enough of a reason for me to put them number 1. Just because like it's not based on last year or the year before. It's based on the right now. It is somewhat based on, like, my faith in a team is somewhat based on experience of seeing them win in the playoffs. There is something to that. Like when I say Stafford and McVay, or when I say, the Bucs, like things like certain players having experience, that does matter. But I'm also looking at how they've played this year. And Kansas City, I've just seen like a lot of inconsistency from both sides of the ball throughout the season. I do think the offense is peaking entering the playoffs. I do think that Joe Thuney playing left tackle has been a blessing. I do feel like Worthy has finally been used properly and he's been explosive. I like, how they're going to be able to have, multi-tight end formations with Kelsey and Gray, multi-wide receiver formations with Brown, Worthy, and Hopkins. I think they need to get their run game going a bit more in the playoffs, definitely, because I don't think their passing game is quite good enough to throw 40 times and win against the best teams. But we'll see. I think they need to run it a little bit more competently. Defensively, I think they've been good, and I think it's the strength of their team overall. They're very well schemed. They have a number of good players. It's just that we've seen kind of the cracks in both their pass rush and their secondary at certain moments. Their pass rush is not overwhelmingly great. Chris Jones is going to have to dominate, same as George Karlaftis. Their secondary, Watson is back. That should help, but I don't feel like they're a shutdown unit like they were last year. So it feels like they're just like slightly worse than last year. Maybe they're more explosive offensively, little bit, but this team, I just don't know if they have the absolutely, utterly dominant defense that they had last year that they could rely on series after series, down after down, big play after big play. And that gives me pause because I'm thinking about the Bills and how good their offense is, the Ravens, how good their offense is, Detroit, how good their offense is. And sure, the Chiefs have the best defense out of that group, right? Like the Eagles got a better defense than the Chiefs, I would say, overall. And their offense is probably better too. But you know what the Chiefs have is they've got the quarterback and the coaching. And that's what kind of gives them the edge to me. I think the Chiefs defense and the Eagles defense is pretty close. But I just feel like the Chiefs, they've just shown enough inconsistency for me to question them as the number 2 team. And they don't even have 60 plus points in point differential. So that also, them just continuously playing really close games. Eventually, it's going to catch up with you, especially against these best teams in the league. If a fumble goes the wrong way, if a call goes the wrong way, eventually, if an interception or a tip ball goes the wrong way, you could see things spiral and then potentially not be able to win. And then at number 1, I've got the Bills. A large part of it is that they beat Detroit and they beat the Chiefs. And at the end of the day, the teams that I think are most likely to be there at the end are the Chiefs, the Lions, the Ravens, and the Eagles. And the Bills did not play the Eagles. They lost to the Ravens. But I feel like, first of all, they would play the Ravens this time at home if they do play them. And let's say they play the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, the Lions in the Super Bowl. They beat both those teams. They proved that they could do that. Why can't they do it again? You know what I'm saying? And then on top of that, they've got the best player in football this year, in my opinion. That's big. They've got a really good O-line. They've got a balanced offense. They've got a lot of different weapons. And I think that's also something that I like about the Bills over the Ravens. I think their O-line and pass protection is a little bit better. I think that their run game is worse. There's no doubt about that. Their run game's good, but it's not quite that good. But their weaponry, their depth, right? We're talking about the Ravens and losing Zay Flowers and how much that hurts them. The Bills, they could lose Amari Cooper. Does it really hurt them that much? Not really. They could lose Keon Coleman. They could lose Dalton Kincaid. They could lose Khalil Shakir. That might be the biggest one of them all, but it feels like they have a multitude of weapons they can rely on. Defensively, they are a bit questionable because they've had really bad performances. But the thing about their defense this year is they're healthy. It feels like they haven't been healthy. Last year they weren't healthy in the playoffs, and Matt Milano will be there. Bernard should be there. Their secondary is in full tact. Like, their defensive line, they've got Von Miller to come off the edge on third downs now. Greg Rousseau. Like, sure, they're a little bit weaker in power run defense. They're a little bit weaker when you're able to attack that middle of the field. But I don't think they're a bad defense by any means. I think they're on par with the Ravens. Like, I actually don't really see that much separation between the Ravens defense and the Bills defense. I just think one started the season really well and one kind of ended the season really well. And I guess you would prefer the team that ended the season really well. But I think part of that was kind of injuries with the Bills and things like that, and matchups, right? The Ravens haven't really played a lot of good offenses lately. I definitely think they're a worse defense than the Chiefs or the Eagles, but I think their offense is better than the Chiefs or the Eagles. And their quarterback is better than the Eagles. And then you talk about coaching. I mean, Joe Brady has brought a lot to this team. McDermott, as long as he can learn from his mistakes in those big moments of clock management and doesn't just mess it up, I feel like he'll be fine because he is overall a good defensive coach. So in a number of the playoff games that they've played outside of the Chiefs, they've actually played well defensively. You could say maybe that Bengals game, but that's Joe Burrow, that's Pat Mahomes, right? So we'll see how it goes. Like, even against Lamar one time, they played excellent in a playoff game. So we'll see how it goes. Those are my rankings. I think there are 5 teams that can win the Super Bowl. My top 5 teams, I think, can all win the Super Bowl. I think that there's a couple frauds that still remain. There's a couple dark horses. I would say my dark horses are probably the Bucs and the Chargers. And I'd say the frauds, the biggest of them are the Texans, the Steelers, and the Packers, because I think the Packers are just overrated. But that's how I view it. You guys let me know how you view it in the comment section below. It's Mitch. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. Gronk, spike the like button. Peace.